The first thing the parrot said in the Alpha King's voice was, "I am not staring at the aviary maid. I am observing palace security." Mara dropped the seed bucket. Every bird in the royal aviary went silent. That was impressive, because the east wall held 17 finches, 3 hawks, 2 doves, 1 elderly raven with opinions about everyone, and a brand new emerald parrot who had apparently chosen treason as a morning hobby. The seed bucket hit the floor, bounced once, and sprayed millet across Mara's boots. The parrot leaned forward on his golden perch. He was bright green, sharp-eyed, and wearing the expression of a creature who had never paid rent but still judged the curtains. "I am not attracted to the aviary maid," he continued in Alpha King Lucien Verrick's exact, deep, icy voice. "I am merely concerned about her ladder safety, repeatedly, with my eyes." Mara stared at him. The parrot stared back. A scarlet finch on the upper rail bit Mara's sleeve, which was rude but understandable. Even the birds knew that sentence needed an answer. "No," Mara whispered. The parrot fluffed himself. "Her hands are very steady." Mara lifted one finger at him, which was not a royal gesture but carried sincere feeling. "Absolutely no." The parrot clicked his beak in triumph. "Kings do not sigh over women who carry birdseed." Mara closed her eyes. Some women began their mornings with tea. Mara Vale, lowest-ranked keeper in the royal aviary, had begun hers by being romantically accused by livestock in the voice of the most powerful werewolf in the kingdom. Worse, the accusation had evidence. The Alpha King had come to the aviary before dawn, alone except for his guards outside the door. He had stood beneath the parrot's covered cage, believing himself unheard, and inspected the room with the grim concentration of a man checking border defenses. Then Mara had walked past in a patched brown dress with a broom, a sleepy dove on her shoulder, and exactly no intention of becoming a royal problem. Apparently, that had been enough to damage a monarch. The parrot lifted one foot. "She is small," he repeated in Lucien's voice, softer this time. "But she does not move like prey." Mara's eyes snapped open. That was not funny. Or rather, it was funny in the way a chandelier falling during dinner was funny, only if it missed you. Mara had worked with birds long enough to know the difference between random mimicry and remembered truth. A bird repeated tone, breath, rhythm, and feeling. This bird had not invented Lucien's voice. He had stored it. The aviary door handle turned. Mara looked at the parrot. The parrot looked delighted. "Do not repeat anything," she hissed. The door opened. Alpha King Lucien Verrick stepped inside with Captain Rook, 2 council clerks, and Lord Caravan of the Western Reach, the man who had delivered the parrot as a diplomatic gift only 6 hours earlier. The king looked cold, flawless, and entirely innocent of emotional damage. He wore black wool, silver clasps, and the expression of a man who could silence a council by breathing through his nose. The parrot puffed up. "Her hair smells like rain." Mara considered climbing into the seed cabinet and living there forever. Captain Rook coughed into his glove. One clerk found the ceiling fascinating. Lord Caravan smiled too quickly. Lucien's silver eyes moved from the parrot to Mara, then down to the millet scattered around her boots. "Miss Vale," the king greeted her. His voice was the same voice that had just accused itself of ladder safety concerns. That made greeting him feel like being politely stabbed by a very handsome knife. Mara curtsied with as much dignity as a woman could manage while standing in birdseed. "Your Majesty, the new diplomatic parrot is settling in." The parrot gave a harsh little laugh. "Poorly." Mara did not look at him. Looking would only reward treason. Lord Caravan stepped forward in a coat of wine-red velvet and a smile polished smooth enough to slide off. "He is a rare emerald crown parrot," Caravan announced. "A treasure from the Western Reach. We call him Aurelius." The parrot sneezed. Mara lowered her gaze. In her professional opinion, the bird did not approve of the name. Lucien studied the cage. His face remained still. But Mara had spent 7 years watching hawks pretend they were not injured. Stillness could lie. His left hand curled once at his side. "Aurelius repeats quickly," the king observed. The parrot copied him instantly. Aurelius repeats quickly. Then, in Lucian's private dawn voice, the bird added, Do not stare at Mara Vale like a starving man near pie. The aviary froze again. The elderly raven above the east window made a dry, clicking sound that sounded exactly like judgment. Mara wished the floor would open. The floor refused. Stone floors were loyal to nobody. Lord Caravan laughed, light and false. An amusing creature! He must have heard servants practicing nonsense in your majesty's voice. The parrot turned one bright eye toward him. Mara saw the change at once. His feathers flattened, his claws gripped the perch too tightly. The joke vanished from his body, even while his beak remained closed. Birds did not understand court rank. They understood threat. Caravan took one more step toward the cage. Perhaps the bird girl has been entertaining herself. The scarlet finch bit Mara's sleeve again. Mara agreed with the finch's legal position. Lucian's gaze cooled. Miss Vale works in my aviary. You will use her name. The parrot bobbed. Use her name. Then, with awful timing, he used Lucian's private voice again. Mara. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The two clerks looked ready to resign from literacy. Mara's cheeks burned. Lucian's jaw tightened so faintly most people would have missed it. Mara did not miss it, because she had suddenly become an expert in all his smallest disasters. Lord Caravan's smile thinned. Of course. Miss Vale, I meant no offense. The parrot copied the apology in Caravan's smooth voice, then ruined it by adding a phrase Mara had not heard before. Let the king blame the bird girl. Silence hit the aviary hard enough to startle the doves. Mara forgot her embarrassment. Lucian turned his head slowly toward Caravan. Caravan's pleasant face did not move, but his scent changed. Mara was only human, not wolf-born, yet even she felt something sour enter the air. A charming trick, Caravan murmured. Parrots repeat anything. That was true. It was also the kind of truth guilty people loved because they could hide behind it. Mara looked at the bird again. The parrot's right foot trembled. His feathers were too smooth, pressed tight in the way frightened birds used when trying to appear untouchable. He had not repeated Caravan with playfulness. He had repeated him with fear. Lucian dismissed the clerks with a glance. Captain Rook guided them out before either man could develop a permanent facial expression. Caravan lingered one heartbeat too long. The bird should be presented tonight at Moon Court, he advised. A diplomatic gift deserves witnesses. The parrot ducked his head. Mara noticed. Lucian noticed Mara noticing. Captain, the king ordered, escort Lord Caravan to breakfast. Caravan bowed. As your majesty commands. The parrot copied him in a whisper. As your majesty commands. Then, in Caravan's voice, lower and sharper, he added, By tonight, the maid will look guilty. Captain Rook's hand landed on his sword. Caravan laughed once. Remarkable bird! Mara thought remarkable was one word for it. Another was witness. When Caravan left, the room breathed again. The finches began scolding one another. The hawks blinked. The old raven muttered like a retired judge disappointed in the youth. Mara remained beside the spilled millet, alone with the Alpha King, a captain by the door, and a parrot who had just built a bridge between royal embarrassment and possible treason. It was not the morning she had planned. Her plan had involved cleaning trays, changing water, and avoiding men who wore crowns. Lucian stepped closer to the cage. He did not crowd the bird. That surprised Mara. Most nobles approached animals as if animals were furniture with inconvenient moods. Can you tell what frightens him? Lucian asked. Mara did not answer immediately. She was low-ranked, low-paid, and usually invisible unless a hawk refused food or a raven stole something shiny. Kings did not ask her opinion. Kings issued instructions near her while she carried buckets. The parrot helped. Mara knows. He used Lucian's voice again, which turned the simple statement into something dangerously intimate. Lucian's ears went faintly red. Mara, because she valued survival, pretended not to see. He is frightened of Lord Caravan, she explained, not because of his coat or scent, because of his voice. His foot tightens whenever he hears it. Pippin, as Mara had already decided to rename him in private because no innocent bird deserved Aurelius, lifted the trembling foot as evidence. Captain Rook looked impressed despite himself. You can read that from a foot? Mara glanced at him. Captain, if your soldiers started sleeping upside down and plucking their own hair before battle, I assume you would notice. Rook accepted that with a solemn nod. The parrot clicked. Notice the foot. Mara pointed at the bird. Please stop making me sound important. Important, the parrot repeated. Lucien looked at Mara. His expression had softened by less than a feather's width, which for him seemed to equal a public festival. You are important if you can tell me whether that phrase was trained into him or overheard. Mara's stomach tightened. That was the question. Caravan could dismiss one embarrassing romantic line as nonsense. He could dismiss a repeated threat as a servant's prank. But if the bird had overheard real plotting, someone had sent a witness into the heart of the court while believing everyone would treat him as a decoration. People underestimated birds. They also underestimated maids. Mara had lived inside both mistakes for years. I need time with him, she told the king. No crowd, no Caravan, no clerk asking whether a parrot may legally testify. Captain Rook blinked. Can a parrot legally testify? The parrot answered in Lucien's voice. If the council can speak for 6 hours, surely the bird deserves 5 minutes. For one dangerous second, Lucien almost smiled. Mara saw it. Captain Rook saw it. The old raven absolutely saw it and made a sound like a door hinge gossiping. Lucien recovered his royal face. You will have the day. And tonight? Mara asked. The king's gaze sharpened. Tonight Lord Caravan expects the bird to humiliate you at Mooncourt. We should learn why. The word we landed softly. Mara pretended it did not warm anything in her chest. Pippin ruined the effort. We, he repeated, smug as sunrise. The investigation began with fruit. Mara had learned long ago that people confess to priests, wolves confess to moonlight, and parrots confess to mango. Pippin was not offered mango at once. He was offered apple first, because trust had to be earned, and because mango turned every bird into a sticky criminal. He accepted the apple with the air of a duke disappointed by taxes. Dawn, Mara said gently. What did you hear at dawn? Pippin held the apple, his feathers lifted. Her hair smells like rain, Mara sighed. Not that part. Lucien stood across the room with his hands behind his back, pretending to inspect the hawk perches. He was doing a terrible job. He had inspected the same perch 4 times. The hawk on it looked personally offended. Pippin tilted his head. I am not staring. Also not that part, Mara guided. Captain Rook coughed. Mara gave him one look. He turned the cough into a discussion with a water bowl. Pippin nibbled the apple and shifted voices. Tonight, he whispered in Sherwin's tone. Mooncourt. Make her repeat it before the king. Mara went still. Lucien stopped pretending to care about the perch. Repeat what? Mara asked. Pippin's eyes grew bright and strained. The border seal is broken. The king hid the treaty. The maid touched the cage. The maid touched the seal. The words tumbled out in fragments, not performance but memory. Mara heard the rhythm beneath them, one man instructing another, close to a covered cage, confident that a bird was only an ornament. Lucien crossed the room in 2 silent strides. There is no broken border seal, he stated. Pippin answered with Caravan's laugh. There will be. The hawk on the perch spread his wings as if even he wished to leave politics. Mara rubbed her thumb over a scratch on the cage door. The new cage had arrived sealed with western wax, a glossy red impressed with Caravan's stag crest. Mara had cut that wax at dawn to let the bird breathe. She remembered the seal crumbling too easily. Your Majesty, she began. Where is the delivery wax? Lucien looked at Captain Rook. Rook looked at the work table. The table held the delivery parchment, the cage cloth, a fruit knife, a coil of twine, and enough seed dust to feed a philosophical mouse. Mara crossed to it and lifted the torn wax pieces with a clean cloth. The red surface had a second mark beneath the stag, a faint crescent line, almost hidden. Lucien's face changed. It was small, but the room felt it. That is the Iron Moon Treaty Seal, he said. Mara's mouth went dry. Someone pressed royal treaty wax beneath Caravan's delivery wax? To make it look as though the treaty passed through this aviary, Rook concluded. The parrot added helpfully, Bird girl did it. Mara turned slowly. Pippin. He bobbed, proud to be useful. Lucian's gaze cut to her. Pippin? I refuse to call him Aurelius. Because? Because Aurelius sounds like a man who explains wine at people. Captain Rook lost a quiet battle with his mouth. Lucian looked at the parrot, then back at Mara. Pippin, he decided. The bird puffed up as if crowned. Pippin. Mara had not expected the Alpha King to accept the name. She also had not expected him to have a secret private voice full of ladder concerns. The day was becoming educational. They found the second clue in the cage cloth. Pippin hated the cloth. Not dislike, hate. When Mara lifted the dark green covering from the table, the parrot flattened against the back of the cage and made a small rasping sound. It was not a word, it was fear before language. Mara lowered the cloth at once. There is something in the hem. Rook stepped forward. Lucian stopped him with one hand. Let Miss Vale handle it. The parrot repeated softly, Let Miss Vale. This time, the words did not embarrass her. They steadied her. Mara took the cloth to the window and ran her fingers along the seam. A small, stiff line hid beneath the stitching. She opened it with her bird knife and shook out a sliver of black wax wrapped in thread. The scent rose sharp and bitter. Pippin shrieked. Every bird in the room exploded into sound. Lucian moved between Mara and the cage before anyone else could breathe. It was pure wolf instinct, sudden and protective. It was also unnecessary, unless black wax had learned to leap. Pippin shouted in Lucian's voice, Protect her! Mara nearly dropped the wax. Lucian went very still. Rook stared at the window. The raven made a noise that sounded like laughter with paperwork. Mara decided mercy was a virtue and ignored all of them. This wax frightened him, she explained, focusing hard on the evidence. It may have been used near the cage while Serwyn's men rehearsed phrases. Lucian accepted the wax in a folded cloth. His fingers did not touch hers, but the space between them somehow became a whole separate room. Black pine resin, he identified, used by Western handlers to keep birds quiet during travel. Mara's anger rose. They drugged him? Likely enough to make him still, Lucian answered. Not enough to erase what he heard. Pippin muttered something in Carwyn's voice that sounded like an insult to everyone with legs. Mara gave him mango. Rook watched this with concern. Is that wise? No, Mara admitted, but he has earned crime fruit. Pippin took the mango and immediately looked more dangerous. The third clue arrived because Lucian tried to apologize. This was unexpected enough that Mara nearly blamed the mango. The king stood beside the east window while Captain Rook secured the wax. Sunlight edged his black hair and turned his silver eyes almost pale. He looked less like a monarch and more like a man who had spent too long being obeyed and not enough time being understood. Miss Vale, he began, if my presence before dawn caused you discomfort, I regret it. It was a careful apology. Royal, polished, almost painfully restrained. Pippin swallowed mango and translated. I stared like an idiot. Mara pressed her lips together. Lucian closed his eyes. Rook turned away so fast his shoulder hit a hanging scoop. Your Majesty, Mara managed, you are not responsible for everything the bird repeats. Pippin leaned forward. I am responsible for my eyes. Mara failed. A laugh slipped out before she could stop it. It was not court laughter, delicate and safe. It was real, warm, and startled. Lucian opened his eyes. For a moment, the investigation, the wax, the plot, and Lord Carwyn all moved to the edge of the room. The king looked at her as if her laugh had done something worse than treason. Pippin, who had no respect for sacred moments, whispered, Again. Mara covered her mouth. Lucian's expression softened into something dangerously human. The bird has poor manners, he noted. The bird has excellent hearing, Mara corrected. Unfortunately. For you, yes. Rook made a strangled sound. Mara remembered she was teasing the Alpha King of the Iron Moon throne and immediately wished to become a decorative fern. Lucian did not punish her. His mouth curved, barely. Continue, Miss Vale. Pippin clicked. Continue, Mara. Lucian looked at the bird. Do not help. Pippin copied him perfectly. Do not help. Then, in his own scratchy parrot voice, he added, "Help." By noon, Mara understood the shape of Fairwind's plan. He had not sent Pippin merely to amuse the court. He had sent him as a trap with feathers. The Western Reach and Iron Moon had negotiated a border treaty for 3 months. If the treaty seal appeared broken inside Lucian's own aviary, Caravan could claim the king had hidden or altered the agreement. If the strange, low-ranked bird keeper had touched the cage, cut the wax, and been overheard speaking suspicious phrases, she would make a convenient culprit. A servant could be blamed without starting a war. A servant could be punished loudly enough to satisfy wounded pride. A servant could disappear beneath a nobleman's smile. That was the serious part. The ridiculous part was that Caravan had trusted a parrot to perform treason on command. Mara almost admired the arrogance. Almost. Then Pippin attempted to hide Mango in his wing feathers, and she lost respect again. Lucian summoned his steward, Seraphine, to examine the delivery records. Seraphine was a narrow woman with silver spectacles and the emotional range of a locked cabinet. She entered the aviary, heard Pippin repeat, "I stared like an idiot," looked once at the king, and decided, with admirable discipline, to become blind. The delivery document lists 2 handlers, Seraphine reported after a brisk review. Both Western. Neither remained in the palace after midnight. Pippin copied her crisp voice. Neither remained. Seraphine looked at the bird. Useful. Pippin puffed up. Mara whispered, "Do not encourage him." Pippin copied that too. Seraphine's spectacles flashed. The bird has excellent diction. Lucian looked pained. That is part of the problem. They tested Pippin's phrases carefully. Mara refused to let anyone shout at him or force repetition. She used fruit, rhythm, and calm questions. Pippin repeated what he trusted and went silent when fear crowded him. That silence told Mara as much as his words. When she mentioned the treaty, he tucked one foot. When she mentioned the cage cloth, he trembled. When she mentioned Serwyn, he snapped at the air. When Lucian stepped too close while worried, Pippin repeated, "Do not frighten her," and Lucian immediately stepped back so fast he nearly collided with Seraphine. Mara pretended to study the wax. Seraphine did not pretend. She wrote something in her notebook. Lucian saw. "That is not evidence." "No, Your Majesty," Seraphine replied. "That is personal amusement." Captain Rook laughed once and then remembered he enjoyed employment. By mid-afternoon, they had enough to build a defense, but not enough to crush Serwyn. The black wax proved the bird had been handled with Western resin. The hidden treaty seal proved someone had placed royal wax beneath the cage seal before Mara touched it. Pippin's repeated phrases suggested instructions, but the council would resist calling a parrot a witness. Councils, in Mara's experience, resisted anything that did not arrive in a velvet folder. The problem was motive. Why would Sherwin risk such an absurd plan? The answer came when Pippin began arguing with his own reflection in a silver water dish. "King hides weakness," he croaked in Sherwin's voice. Mara lifted her head. Pippin pecked the reflection. "King likes Bird Girl. Bird Girl touched seal. King protects Bird Girl. Council sees weakness." Lucian's face turned to stone. There it was. Sherwin did not only want to break the treaty. He wanted to make Lucian look compromised by a low-ranked servant. If the king defended Mara, he appeared ruled by private desire. If he sacrificed her, he became cruel in front of his own household. Either choice weakened him. Mara looked at the parrot. Pippin looked back with Mango on his beak. He had delivered the motive while looking like a fruit criminal. "He planned to use me as bait," Mara said. Lucian's voice dropped. "He planned to use my regard for you?" The room became too quiet. Mara's heart gave one stupid, hopeful thump and then tried to deny responsibility. Pippin had no such restraint. "Regard," he repeated lovingly. The finch bit Mara's sleeve. Mara looked at the finch. "I know." Lucian's silver eyes were fixed on her. "You are not bait." The words were quiet, but they carried more force than a shout. Mara wanted to believe them. She also knew courts. Courts could turn a woman's name into a knife before supper. "Tonight they will see a maid, a parrot, and a broken seal," she reminded him. Lord Caravan will make me look foolish first, then guilty. If you defend me too quickly, he will claim you are blinded. Lucian's jaw tightened. Then I will defend you accurately. Pippin leaned down from his perch, accurately staring. Mara covered her face. The moon court gathered at dusk in the Hall of Antlers, because ancient kings had apparently believed diplomacy improved when everyone sat beneath the skulls of enormous deer. Mara entered through the side door with Pippin's cage in both hands, and Captain Rook beside her. Her brown dress had been brushed clean. Her hair had been pinned back twice because the first pin surrendered under pressure. She wore no jewels, no noble colors, and no illusion about how the court saw her. They saw a servant carrying a bird. The nobles glittered along the benches in silver, black, and deep green. Counselors murmured beneath moon-glass chandeliers. Western envoys stood near Lord Caravan, who looked confident enough to be suspicious and handsome enough to be forgiven by people with poor instincts. At the high seat, Alpha King Lucian looked untouchable. Then Pippin saw him and called across the hall in the king's voice, "Do not stare at Mara in public." So much for untouchable. The hall went silent. Mara kept walking because stopping would mean dying where she stood, and she preferred not to give Caravan the satisfaction. Lucian did not move. His face remained royal, controlled, and cold. His ears, unfortunately, betrayed the crown. A ripple moved through the court. Caravan smiled. Mara placed the cage on the evidence table and leaned close to Pippin. "We discussed this." Pippin bobbed. "Public." "That was not permission." One elderly counselor squinted at her. "Is the servant arguing with the bird?" Seraphine, seated near the records table, answered without looking up. "The bird started it." That did not help the dignity of the Iron Moon Court. Sherwin stepped forward. "Your Majesty, honored council, I regret that my gift has caused disruption. I fear someone in this palace has trained the creature to mock the throne and conceal a far more serious offense." Mara watched him choose every word. Smooth, concerned, poison wrapped in velvet. "This morning," Sherwin continued, "the treaty seal between Western Reach and Iron Moon was found damaged. The cage was delivered intact. Only one person opened it before dawn." Every eye moved to Mara. Pippin whispered, "Bird Girl did it." The court murmured. Mara felt the trap close around her ankles. Lucian's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. Mara did not look at him. If she did, Caravan would smile wider. Instead, she looked at Pippin's feet. His right claw gripped the perch. His left foot lifted, tucked close. Fear posture, not play. That was her ground. Mara curtsied to the court. "May I speak, Your Majesty?" Before Lucian could answer, Pippin used his voice. "Let Mara speak." The hall went still again. Lucian's mouth did not move, but something like grim amusement flickered in his eyes. "Miss Vale may speak." Mara lifted the folded cage cloth. "Lord Caravan is correct that I opened the cage at dawn. The bird was struggling to breathe beneath this covering. When I cut the delivery wax, I found a second seal hidden beneath it." Seraphine carried the wax fragments to the council table. The old counselor adjusted his spectacles and frowned. "This lower impression bears the Iron Moon Treaty Crescent." Serwyn sighed softly. "A clever servant might plant such a fragment." Pippin copied his sigh so accurately, several nobles looked uncomfortable. Mara kept her tone steady. "A clever servant might. A frightened bird would not react to the hidden cloth unless that cloth had been used on him." She lifted the hemmed section and revealed the black wax. Pippin flattened at once. His wings trembled. The reaction was small but unmistakable to anyone who had ever watched fear arrive before language. The court did not laugh then. Good. Some things should not be jokes. Mara explained the black pine resin, how Western handlers used it to quiet birds during transport, and how Pippin responded to Serwyn's voice differently from Lucian's. She did not rush. She kept the evidence in order, the false seal, the drugged cloth, the repeated instructions, the body language. This was where Serwyn expected her to sound like a hysterical maid. So she sounded like 7 years of unpaid expertise. Pippin helped by remaining silent for almost 30 seconds, which was either courage or mango fatigue. Then, Serwyn made his mistake. Enough, he snapped. You are allowing a servant to build treason from parlor tricks. Pippin's head shot up. Mara saw his eye brighten. He had heard that tone before. In Carwyn's voice, sharp and low, the parrot repeated, You should be careful, bird girl. The Western envoys stiffened. Carwyn went pale. Pippin continued, and this time the words came in a rush. By tonight, the maid will look guilty. The king will protect her. The council will see his weakness. The hall erupted. Carwyn raised both hands. A trained trick! Pippin leaned forward and repeated in Carwyn's voice, If the bird speaks wrong, wring its neck before court. The hall fell silent so quickly the chandeliers seemed loud. Mara's hand went to the cage bars. Lucien rose. He did not shout. He did not need to. Lord Carwyn! The name cracked across the hall like winter. Carwyn's mask slipped. Just once. His eyes cut toward Pippin with such hatred that the bird recoiled. That look convicted him more than any parrot could. Captain Rook moved before Carwyn could reach his sleeve. 2 guards took the Western Lord by the arms. Carwyn laughed. Ugly now. You will arrest me over a servant and a bird? Lucien descended from the high seat. The court watched him cross the moonlit floor. He did not go to Carwyn first. He went to Mara. That choice moved through the hall like a thrown torch. Lucien stopped beside her, close enough that every noble could see he stood with the low-ranked keeper and the trembling parrot before he addressed the lord who had insulted them. I arrest you for forging treaty evidence, drugging a royal diplomatic animal, threatening a member of my household, and attempting to manipulate this council into condemning an innocent woman. Mara heard the word woman. Not servant, not bird girl. Woman. Pippin, who apparently recognized significant vocabulary, whispered, Innocent woman. Lucien glanced at the cage. For once, accurate. A startled laugh moved through the hall. It broke the fear just enough for people to breathe. Carwyn struggled. You prove my point. You shame your crown for her. Lucien turned back to him. No. I shame my crown if I let rank decide truth. The words struck harder than anger. Mara felt them land in the benches, among counselors who had been ready to let her name be used as a broom for noble dirt. Lucien continued. Miss Mara Vale saw what trained envoys missed, what clerks nearly filed away, and what this court was prepared to dismiss because she carries seed instead of a title. Her skill protected this throne. The old counselor bowed his head first. Then Seraphine stood. The records office confirms the wax sequence. Miss Vale's explanation is consistent with all physical evidence. Captain Rook added, and with the bird's reactions. Pippin fluffed. Important bird. Mara whispered, Do not push it. Pippin whispered back in Lucien's voice. Important Mara. The court heard. Of course the court heard. The bird had never once chosen privacy when public ruin was available. Lucien looked at Mara. For one heartbeat, the Hall of Antlers disappeared. There was only the king with moonlight on his shoulders and something unguarded in his eyes. Then he faced the council. From this night, Mara Vale is appointed royal keeper of the king's aviary and witness to avian evidence in matters of court security. The old counselor blinked. Is that an office? Seraphine turned one page. It is now. It was an old office, Lucien corrected. Unused for 86 years. I am restoring it. Seraphine made another note. Restored offices are less troublesome than new ones. Mara could not tell whether she was being promoted or swallowed by bureaucracy. Pippin helped clarify. Royal Keeper Mara. The title rolled across the hall in Lucien's voice. Mara's throat tightened. She had wanted safety. She had wanted the truth believed. She had not expected a name that could stand upright in court. Serwyn was dragged toward the side doors, still protesting. Pippin watched him go with one eye bright and one foot tucked. Mara leaned closer to the cage. He cannot hurt you now. The parrot shifted toward her hand. Lucien heard. His voice softened, but he spoke loudly enough for the court. Nor can he hurt you. That was when Pippin decided the public recognition scene needed more feathers. He spread his wings and declared in Lucien's deepest voice, I choose Mara Valet. The hall stopped breathing. Mara stopped existing. Lucian looked at the parrot as if considering whether diplomatic immunity applied to soup. Pippin continued, radiant with purpose. Not for ladder safety. Someone in the back made a strangled noise. Mara stared at the cage. Pippin, no. The parrot bobbed. For home. The laughter died before it fully formed. Lucian's face changed. Not embarrassment this time. Truth. He turned to the court again, and when he spoke, his voice belonged to him alone. I do choose Mara Valet. Not as a scandal. Not as a weakness. Not as a servant I favor in secret. I choose to honor the woman who saved my throne, protected a frightened creature, and told me the truth when everyone else found silence more convenient. Mara could not breathe properly. This was too much for moonlight, antlers, and a parrot with mango on his beak. Lucian lowered his voice, but the court still heard. If she permits it, I would like to know her beyond crisis. That was careful, warm, public without trapping her. The kind of sentence a king offered when he knew power could crush even affection. Mara looked at him for a long second. Pippin whispered, say yes. Mara glanced at the bird. You are not my advisor. Say yes, Pippin repeated in Seraphine's voice. Seraphine adjusted her spectacles. I did not authorize that. The court laughed then, not cruelly. The sound loosened something in the hall. Mara looked back at Lucian. I permit you to try, Your Majesty. Lucian bowed to her. Not a royal nod. A real bow. Half the council forgot how to blink. Pippin whispered, try very hard. Lucian straightened. I intend to. The external crisis ended in paperwork, which was how Mara learned that even dramatic treason eventually became forms. Caravan's forged seal was matched to wax in his travel chest. His handlers confessed after Captain Rook explained the difference between cooperation and spending the winter in a northern cell. The Western envoys suddenly remembered several suspicious details they had apparently misplaced in their sleeves. By nightfall, the treaty plot was clear. Caravan had meant to create a false scandal, accuse Lucian of hiding a broken border agreement, and use Mara as the low-ranked hand that made the lie believable. If Lucian protected her, the council would question his judgment. If he sacrificed her, his own household would fear him. Either result weakened the Iron Moon throne before the next negotiation. It was a polished plan. It was also completely unprepared for a parrot with excellent timing and no respect for noble facial expressions. The council issued a formal apology to Mara. It was 3 paragraphs long and somehow less satisfying than Pippin calling the old counselor Antlerhead in Lucian's voice, but Mara accepted both. The royal keeper appointment became official before supper. Seraphine handed Mara a sealed document, a key to the aviary records cabinet, and a list of responsibilities heavy enough to stun a goose. Mara stared at the list. Does this mean I am paid more? Seraphine looked offended on her behalf. Substantially. Mara decided she loved restored offices. The household changed faster than she expected. The kitchen sent better fruit for the birds and pretended it had always done so. The guards stopped calling her bird girl and began calling her Keeper Vale with the stiff discomfort of men learning manners in real time. The younger maids asked whether Pippin could repeat the voice of anyone who had complimented them. Mara told them no. Pippin told them yes. Lucian visited the aviary after moonrise. He came alone this time, though Mara suspected Captain Rook was lurking somewhere nearby in the professional manner of men who considered doorways a personality. The aviary was warm, with banked coals and sleepy feathers. The finches had tucked themselves into corners. The hawks balanced in still dignity. The old raven watched everyone like he expected taxes. Pippin sat on his perch with one foot tucked, tired after a day of crime, evidence, promotion, and fruit. Mara was sweeping Millet again. Her life had changed, but Millet remained emotionally committed to the floor. Lucian paused by the door. Keeper Vale. Mara looked up. The title still startled her. It sounded like someone else's coat placed around her shoulders. Your Majesty. Pippin opened one eye. Lucian, he corrected in Lucian's voice. Mara pointed the broom at him. You are asleep. Pippin closed his eye. Lucian. The king's mouth curved. He has opinions. He has crimes. Useful crimes. That is how criminals get confidence. Lucian crossed the room, slow enough not to unsettle the birds. He stopped beside the work table where the evidence had been sorted that morning. The table was clean now. Only a bowl of apple slices remained. I owe you an apology, he told her. Mara leaned on the broom. For staring? He accepted the blow with kingly grace. For making you vulnerable to Cherwin's scheme. That sobered her. The fire clicked softly. A dove shifted in sleep. You did not make me low-ranked, Mara answered. The court did that before you saw me. Lucian's eyes held hers. I allowed the court to remain a place where that mattered too much. Mara did not know what to do with a king who listened to correction and then found a deeper fault in himself. It was inconvenient. It made staying guarded much harder. Pippin opened one eye again. Very hard, Mara sighed. He is going to ruin every serious conversation we ever have. Lucian's voice warmed. Every? Mara realized too late what she had said. The old raven made a dry sound. The finch who had bitten her sleeve earlier woke just long enough to chirp with appalling smugness. Mara looked at the birds. I feed all of you. None of them appeared grateful. Lucian stepped closer, leaving space for her to refuse closeness if she wanted. That mattered. In a day full of public declarations and court titles, the small courtesy felt more intimate than the bow. I meant what I said in the hall, he told her. I would like to know you beyond crisis. Mara studied him. Without the court around him, Lucian seemed less like a cold statue and more like a tired man who had learned to become stone because everyone kept throwing things at the king. You should know I am difficult, she warned. Pippin muttered, steady hands. Mara ignored him. I argue with birds. I distrust gifts with too much ribbon. I hold grudges against leaking gutters. And if you stare at me like a starving man near pie, I will notice. Lucian's laugh was quiet and real. It filled the aviary gently, not like a court performance, but like heat returning to a room. Then I will try to stare with dignity. Pippin lifted his head. Impossible. Mara lost the fight against smiling. Lucian saw it. This time, he did not look away. There, Pippin whispered. Invade country. Mara covered her face with one hand. Lucian looked at the parrot. No invasions. Small country. No. Village? Mara laughed so hard the broom slipped against the table. Lucian caught it before it fell. Their hands met on the wooden handle. For a moment, neither moved. The contact was simple. Warm fingers, broom handle, seed dust, a room full of sleeping birds pretending not to supervise. It was not a grand kiss beneath moonlight. It was not a fevered claim. It was quieter than that. It felt possible. Lucian released the broom first because he was careful. Mara appreciated that more than she knew how to say. May I visit tomorrow? He asked. Mara tilted her head. For palace security? Naturally. Ladder safety? If required. Pippin made a soft approving cluck. Hair smells like rain. Mara gave him the look of a woman reconsidering mango privileges. Lucian's smile deepened. For you, he said, ignoring the bird with heroic effort. If you allow it. Mara looked around the aviary, at the finches, the hawks, the doves, the old raven, the impossible parrot who had turned her life upside down before breakfast and somehow landed her on her feet. That morning, she had been the woman at the edge of the room, useful only when something needed cleaning or calming. By night, she had stood in Moon Court, named truth aloud, and been heard, not rescued, recognized. The difference mattered. She looked back at Lucian. You may visit tomorrow. Pippin whispered. Bring mango. Mara pointed at him. You are not invited to the romance. The parrot looked deeply offended. Lucian glanced at Mara with the calm face of a king and the eyes of a man trying not to laugh. I suspect he will attend anyway. He will critique. Harshly? Professionally. Pippin tucked his head beneath one wing. Very steady hands, he mumbled. Mara rolled her eyes, but her smile stayed. Lucian did not reach for her hand again. Not yet. Instead, he stood beside her in the warm hush of the aviary, while the palace settled around them. Outside, the court was still writing reports, polishing reputations, and pretending it had never believed a nobleman over a bird keeper. Inside, the birds slept. The seed bucket sat upright. The The leaking gutter had finally stopped dripping. For the first time all day, no one accused Mara of treason, romance, or ladder-related temptation. It was peaceful for almost 10 whole seconds. Then Pippin lifted his head without opening his eyes. Home, he said in Lucian's voice. Mara went still. Lucian looked at her. The word rested between them, small and enormous. Home was not a throne room. It was not a title. It was not a public declaration in front of antlers and counselors. Sometimes home was a warm aviary after a terrible day. Sometimes it was a king learning to laugh softly. Sometimes it was a woman with seed dust on her sleeve being seen clearly at last. Sometimes it had feathers, stolen phrases, and terrible timing. Mara touched the edge of Pippin's cage. Yes, she whispered. Home. Lucian stood beside her, quiet and steady. The parrot sighed, satisfied. And for once, he did not repeat anything.